Hello, folks. Hello, folks. This is Red We Met, and I thought I'd do something that I haven't done before. And that is actually tell you things about me that are not in my book. They are pre-outfit, um, pre-FBI, pre-organized crime, period. But many years ago, so it happens when you get to be an old man. You could say many years ago. Many years ago, let's say 1968, when I was discharged from the Marine Corps, I went back to some people that I did know. Before I went to the Marine Corps, I knew several guys that had served in the Marine Corps. And one of them became a very close friend of mine. Actually, before I went in the Marine Corps, he moved and he was married. At that time, he had two children. He had two girls. And they lived in an apartment in the city of Chicago. And it was on the second floor. And he was looking for people to help him move. Well, I don't know about any of you that have moved before by yourselves. And he was young at the time, early 20s, and two children, a wife, just trying to, get things along in the early 60s, mid 60s. So I showed up, and one other guy showed up, and my buddy Danny, and I'll explain his name to you later, but Danny was a big man. I mean, heavy, good size, not just heavy, but strong, very strong. And while we were moving, one of the most memorable things was I was at the bottom side of a refrigerator, and he lived on the second floor. And he asked me to hold the refrigerator steady, and they were going to lift it up to get it out of the door. And they did. And it slid on the two steps going down, and it fell back and knocked me through the banister. And I went down 2 stories, flat on my back. That wasn't the bad part. The bad part was when I looked up, all I could see was this big square thing coming towards me, the refrigerator. So I rolled. And after I was okay, everybody just laughed. They thought it was so funny. And it didn't bother, I wasn't hurt. It didn't bother me that much, but it was a funny thing to remember. And that's what I find myself doing lately, is remembering a lot of funny things, especially when it comes to this. And you'll know why as we go along. Well, Danny was a crew chief on a helicopter, USMC helicopter. And occasionally we would go to Glenview Naval Air Station, and we go up in a helicopter. He'd fly me out. He signed me on as a member of the crew. I don't know how. I just said, "Hi, sir," and just sat there. I didn't know what I was doing. I was young. I was only 17, and Danny got away with it. His flight gear, his helmet, his jacket from Vietnam, when he served over in Vietnam. And he was quite a guy, very, very individual. I mean, an unusual individual. And I took a liking to Danny, and Danny took a liking to me. I was like a mascot for him because I was always doing wild and crazy things that made him just laugh. I mean, we all laughed. But I laughed at some of the things he did too. Some of the things he did were really harebrained. But he was a very wonderful man to be with or be around. And As time went on, I was looking for money and ways to make money. And I didn't see a future. This is all playtime. I didn't see a future in anything that had to do with Danny. Danny was out for a good time. He was very disappointed when I got out of the Marine Corps. The first thing he did, I didn't have a place to stay for a while. And so I moved in with him and his wife and his kids. And by that time, he had 3 kids. He had 3 little girls. And Danny was really into motorcycles. The first day I met Danny, he came by on a Indian chopper. It was a tank shift chopper. And this was back in 1965. And what he did was pulled up I was in the alley, and he pulled up by me and said, "Hey, you want to go tooling with me?" That meant riding, tooling. We had a whole different language. I'll go over that with you in a minute. But I climbed on the back of it. First time I'd ever been on the back of a bike like that. The first time I've been on the back of a bike, I think, ever. But I reached over and I grabbed my helmet. I had a helmet, and I put the helmet on. And I also put my gloves on. I had gloves that had like funnel. Is that when they went over my wrists? They were black leather, and they went over my wrists. I put I think I put my leather on too. I put the leather on, the helmet, and my funnels. I already had my boots on, and we went off. And he cracked it on. That means speeded it up. As we were going down Cicero Avenue, going north on Cicero Avenue. We were out south. We were by Cicero when this happened. We're in Cicero when he picked me up. So anyway, we were going into this curve, and the curve was a 15-mile-an-hour curve because there was an overpass. I think it was 31st Street, if I'm not mistaken. But it was Cicero and 31st. And we were on Cicero, we're going north, and he made a right-hand turn. And he leaned into it really hard. And I leaned with him until I saw sparks coming out from the exhaust pipes. And then I'm looking at the loose gravel or loose dirt that was on the asphalt and saying, this does not look good. And as I looked ahead, very far ahead, and we were vibrating and everything else, I could see that there was a big cement wall, had to be 20 feet high or better, that the cars were going down. But away from there was on the bottom, there was like a 6-foot easement, and it was up about maybe, I don't know, it's curb height, and there was a curb all the way along it, and then 6 foot later there was the wall. Mm-hmm. Danny laid it down into the curb, and it was a little bit of a struggle. He always blamed me for it. I always blamed him for it, but it was a little bit of a struggle. I wasn't used to being on the back of a bike. He expected me to lean wherever he leaned, which is usually a good rule. I mean, don't fight the guy you're riding with if you're on the back. So when he laid it down, it really went down hard. And thank God it had crash guards on it. It protected our legs. But there was no protection for what was about to happen. This thing flipped up in the air. Danny stayed with the bike. We must have been doing 70 miles an hour when we went into this curve, at least 70. And it was only like 45, 50 miles an hour on Cicero Avenue. But Danny was a thrill seeker, He really believed in it. So he flipped up in the air. He stayed with the bike. I didn't. I let the bike go. And I did a tumbling act for maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 feet. And then finally, I was hanging onto my helmet, which was, it was a Metal Flake, Bell Metal Flake helmet when they first came out. And it was destroyed. My helmet was destroyed. He was wearing his flight helmet that it was issued by the Marine Corps. It had different visors that came down for different sunscreen or whatever. It was a very well made helmet, and obviously it was made for good crashes because it survived. His head survived anyway. And in my particular case, the only thing that I discovered after the crash was complete and I heard the engine revving, going, ee! And Danny was upside down. His neck was underneath the handlebars. His leg was over the handlebars. His other leg was under the handlebars. His hands were destroyed from scraping along the asphalt. And I thought for sure he was dead. I really did. And I've seen people die before. Before that, I'd seen a lot of people die. But Danny, I shut the engine off. I pulled a spark plug. I didn't mind about getting shocked. Shock was nothing. I just reached over, grabbed the plug and pulled it. No problem. After this, pulling a spark plug didn't mean anything to me. Danny said to me, he said, I think I broke my watch on his wrist. And I said, Danny, I think you broke your leg. He said, yeah, maybe that too. But he had a sense of humor about the whole thing. And he said, what time is it? My watch isn't working. So I pulled the glove back and I looked. My Timex watch that I brought back from Cuba was ground into the wrist. It just was ground into my wrist. So I kind of pulled it up. The blood was gushing out. I just pushed it down and put the watch guard back over it. I reached into he told me where to get it and got some tape. And he said, tape up my wrist for me. And I did. And he said, this is going to be rough now. You got to get me out from underneath here. And we didn't have cell phones or radios or nothing in those days. It just wasn't, we were on our own. And nobody was coming by to say, oh, there's an accident. So I did. I got him out from the bike. And he said, is the bike okay? I mean, he was more worried about the bike than he was himself. And eventually he went to McNeil Memorial Hospital in Berwyn. And I pushed the bike all the way. It was something else. I didn't see him for a little while until he got well. We had different periods of time where we didn't see each other. But Danny was he was a heck of a guy. The kind of bikes we rode later on were, I'm going to show you one, I think I'm going to show you one. Am I here? Well, we'll see. That's what we rode. That's a full dress hog, 74 cubic inch engine, which in my case had some damage to the engine, so I had to bore it out to 84 cubes. But you can see the crash guards in the front, crash guards in the back, saddlebags in the back, and that's what we drove later on. That chopper was nothing like that at all. I mean, it was just nothing like it. So it was what it was. But it was, Danny was a very unusual individual. And we had the closest of relationships. I mean, we couldn't get much closer. Uh, he eventually left his wife and his kids. And he was almost in tears one day when I asked him, for a big man like him. I mean, he was big, he was huge. Uh, I asked him, I said, why? What? I mean, you have such a beautiful wife. She was a little bit overweight, but you have beautiful kids. And he said, I just got talked into the whole thing. He said, I was too young. I was 17 years old. I got her pregnant, and I really didn't want to get married, but my father talked me into it. So did my mother. And he said, I never had a chance to grow up. I had to join the Marine Corps, had to do these other things. Everything was mapped out for me. He said, I didn't like it. And the bottom line was that he wanted to live. He wanted to live his childhood and his craziness. And there was a lot of craziness, believe me. I can't tell you how crazy it was. But Danny was a lot of fun. Now, you may wonder what made me think of Danny. You may wonder a lot of things, but why I'm bringing this up. But it was a wild part of my life. In those days, in order to be part of a group, which we were part of a group, we had a clubhouse over 95th. What was it? It was 45th in Ashland, and kind of a rough neighborhood, an old burned out building that his father secured for us. At any rate, and his father was a great guy, Harv. I liked his mother, but she was kind of standoff. Harv was, I don't know, his name was Harvey. And he was a big man, made Danny look small. He must have been like 6'8", and he had to weigh at least 320 pounds. Big guy. Wasn't afraid of nobody. I mean, or nothing. Also a Marine. It was like Marine Corps tradition. So, at any rate, getting back to the part about me is I was extremely wild. I just got out of the Marine Corps. I gravitated back towards him, but I also gravitated towards, I wanted to be something and make big money. I wanted to be part of the outfit. And I didn't know it as the outfit at that time. It was just called the Syndicate. That's what we called it, the Crime Syndicate. And as time went on, I was spending more time with Milwaukee Phil and Tony Spilaccio than I was with the rest of the guys. And before that, I not only had my colors, and my patch on it with my name on it, but on the other side, I had a patch that said Road Captain, because I was a badass. I could knock anybody into line. I don't care who they were. And Danny used to pride himself in that and say, "This is my guy," because I would do anything, just about anything. I didn't care. I had one of the guys was a welder, and he was building the Hancock building at the time. And I had welding a part on my frame in between two gas tanks. And that's where I clipped a shotgun that I always carried. And it looked like it was part of the bike, but it wasn't. If I needed it, it was there. It only had 4 shots and it was a pump, but that was all I needed. I never pulled it and used it more than once. I fired 1 shot and that was it. There were a lot of strange things that I did that were magnanimous. And because, as you saw the picture in the bike, And I'll show you a picture of the bike again if I can do it without going places that are crazy. Let's see. There you go. That bike, most of the choppers and other bikes had what they call a teardrop gasoline tank. And those tanks held like maybe 2.5, 3 gallons. That wasn't a lot. But the bike you're looking at right now has a gas tank on each side. And each one of those held 3.5 gallons. So therefore, I could get a lot more mileage and do a lot of things that other people just couldn't do. So when it came down to actually getting someplace, I saw these guys run out of gas and they would go to gas stations. They'd walk to a gas station, push their bike to a gas station, especially at nighttime. And they would take what was ever left in the hose because they didn't have any money and the gas station was closed. One particular time in my earlier years, there was an instance. We were headed down south. We were going to Louisville. We were going to Churchill Downs for the Derby. And we always went to events. We went to Daytona 500. We went to Mardi Gras. A lot of things. We go to events and usually rode maybe 40, 50 strong. The police used to watch us. It was kind of rough. But anyway, we were going at nighttime. We started out at nighttime. And we were down in southern Illinois someplace, taking back roads. And people were running out of gas. And some people had siphon hoses where they were trying to siphon gasoline out of cars. And a lot of people were doing a lot of things. And I went to this old Gulf station. It was a Gulf gas station where it had a crank and you crank up the new amount. And most everybody had them locked down at nighttime. And this was a ma and pa joint where there was gasoline up on, or they lived above the gas station. And I went up and I turned the crank and it went ding. And in the middle of the night, everybody heard the ding. I mean, everybody. It was on. The electricity was on. I filled up my tanks. Danny came over and filled up his tanks. All the other guys lined up in line and filled their tanks. And Danny says, okay, come on, everybody divvy up. We're leaving this guy his money. Danny never believed in stealing from anybody and taking something without paying for it. He would always leave the cash. Just before he left, the man came downstairs. His wife was upstairs looking in the window. I wondered if they were calling the police. But the man came down. And he didn't want any trouble. He was afraid, as most people were. I mean, we were kind of intimidating in those days. But Danny gave him the money, gave him a bunch of different cash. And the guy said, no, this is too much. And he said, no, thank you. And we rode on. And I believe we made it down to Louisville on that next tank. So it was something else. But that's another thing, too. We all had nicknames. Danny's nickname was left over from the Marine Corps. He was called Gremlin. And my particular nickname was Billy the Kid because he always said I was an outlaw. And we had Ghost, who used to disappear every now and then. Sometimes they disappear in the fog, so we called him Gray Ghost. Um, we had Hudda, because he used to say Hudda, duh. So we called him Hudda. We had it was a group of people, and we all had fun together. You talk about camaraderie, we had it, and we had some good times, very good times, uh, special times. And some people, they picked up old ladies. They picked up an old lady. Unfortunately for me, I couldn't afford an old lady. I could barely afford me, the way I was living at the time. And eventually, that had to change. I knew I needed money. But Danny was a very special person. And the reason why I even think about him or bring him up, he was a part of my life. And my life changed after that because Danny died. And when he died, I was very upset. I mean, very upset. I had called and tried to reach him and found out his number was disconnected. So I called his parents' home. They lived on Massasoit, right over by the airport, Midway Airport. And his mother would answer the phone. And she'd say, yes, he's here, but he can't talk to you right now. And many times, I mean, I call like every day, different times of the day. And she always gave me the same story. She was very nice to me. She wasn't rude to me. But what I didn't know, I didn't know. And she was having a hard time just dealing with things at the time. And eventually, I did talk to Danny. And he was laughing. He said, hey, man, how you doing? I said, okay, I'm coming along fine. I said, won't be long. I'll be opening up my own business here. And he said, that's great, man. He said, I can't wait for the weather to change. He said, we'll be out tooling on our bikes. He said, you going tooling with me? And that's what he called it, tooling. Out tooling around on a bike, motorcycle. And I said, yeah. I said, that's okay. That's what we'll do, guy. And he said, why don't you come by and see me? And he sounded a little bit rough. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. I said, in a couple of weeks or so. Okay. And I did. Meantime, I didn't hear anything. Danny died. He was 28 years old and he died. That whole time, he was with hospice. And his mother was taking care of him. And his girlfriend was taking care of him. His wife, ex-wife, no. The children didn't even come and see him. He was a mess. And he really needed somebody at that time. And I felt a lot of guilt. That man gave me a lot. When I wanted to, he wanted me to become part of the club and ride. And he had a 1959 FLH. And he said, learn how to ride that thing. He was living on 5 acres then, out in Worth, 9812 South Nottingham. And he told me when I could ride that bike around the yard, he'd give it to me. And he did. And we had a lot of fun on that thing. I did anyway. And we both enjoyed a lot of things together. I had like 2 speeds. One was slow, and the other one was 110, 115 miles an hour. That was it. I was crazy. I was wild. I did things that were ridiculous. There was an older couple that was riding along the expressway one day, and they didn't like the noise of the motorcycles. And the man that was driving, decided he was going to be a wise guy, and he pulled the wheel over and hit one of our guys. I mean, he actually banged into him, almost knocked him over. And Danny just went like this to me. And that meant crack it on. And I did. And I got right next door to him, right next to even with him. And I kicked the side of his door. I booted the side of his door till it was dented in. I just kept booting it and booting it. I wanted him to stop. Then I hit the window with my leg, my foot, and I put my foot through the window. And the breeze was blowing. And he slowed down to maybe 65 by then. He slowed down. And his wife was crying. And he looked like he was going to pull over. He pulled to the right. And I whipped back around on the side of him. And his wife rolled down the window and she was crying. She said, "Please, I'm so sorry. We didn't mean to hurt anybody." And I felt so sorry for him. I said, "Get the hell out of here." And they did. But things like that, there were a lot of things that stick out in my mind as being memorable. After that, I think it was 2 days later, I was on my, we were at the clubhouse and we had this huge, it was it was a table and we all ate at it, but it was something like Gothic because it was at least 12 foot long, maybe 10 foot long, and at least 4 foot wide. It was really wide. So a bunch of the guys picked me up against my will. I was fighting all the way. We'd been drinking too, drinking heavy. And they picked me up and put me on the table on my back. And somebody, I think it was Danny, took a finishing nail and a hammer. And he put the nail up against my ear. And he smacked it with the hammer. And that's how I got my pierced ear. He put a cross in there that hung down. And he said, "You got to show some class, man." He said, "You did." Anyway, that was part of my crazy life. And like I said, it ended very sadly because Danny, he died. He actually died. And there's his gravestone. Daniel H. Baumgard, Illinois, Corporal, USMC, Marine Corps, U.S. Marine Corps, Vietnam vet. He died on he was born on February 4th, 1943, and he died on January 12th, 1972. But I didn't know that. I didn't know he died. And every time I called, the number I called was disconnected. Even his parents were disconnected. They didn't want to have any problems. Danny had a lot of enemies. And it was sad. I mean, even Harv told me that when he went to when they had the funeral, Harv said he had a pistol in each pocket because people got rough. They did things they shouldn't have done. He made it very hard on his parents. But he was my closest friend at one time. And I had a thing about friendships. I had to be with people. I had to have somebody as a buddy. That's the way I lived. But during this period of time, I was hanging around with Milwaukee Phil. I was hanging around with Tony Spilaccio. And that whole crew. They were all a lot older than I was. They were all a lot wiser than I was. But that's the way I figured I'd make money. And I was right. I made the money. Years later, fast forward to 1987. I used to date Danny's sister. And she was a little squirrely, Marilyn. And she married a friend of mine. We were in the Marine Corps together. And he was I don't know how you describe it. He was a wild guy. He drank heavy. He was part of the club. He rode a bike, an XLCH. He used to have a saying, if it doesn't grow, chrome it. And he did. He chromed everything. So he married Marilyn, and that made him Danny's brother-in-law. Well, he was at the funeral. And later on, he called me about something. I forget what it was. And when he called me, I told him I hadn't heard from Danny. He said, didn't you know? And I said, no. He said, Danny died. And I said, you're kidding me. He said, no. He said, he went to Hines VA hospital. And he said, they cut him open like an autopsy, all the way from his throat, all the way to his crotch. They sewed him back up. Cancer. Agent Orange. Agent Orange killed him. And that was a very sad day in my life. Tears rolled down my face. I just couldn't believe he was gone forever, never coming back. And I told Bud, I said, why didn't somebody call me? And he said, I don't know. He said, I really don't know. He said, you guys were close, man. He said, I don't know why anybody called you. Well, Danny, it just happened. It went that way. So it was maybe 8 months later, Lud was killed in an explosion. And Harv and Pearl, Danny's parents, came to the funeral, which I made all the arrangements for it. And by this time, I was 38 years old or something like that. And we sat in the back on a room off to the side, and Lud's mother was there. Lud's father had passed away. His brother was there. His son was there. And Pearl was sitting right next to me, Danny's mother. And I kind of whispered to her. I said, why didn't you call me when Danny died? And she said, well, we just thought it wasn't a good idea. And I said, And later on, she took me aside and she told me, she said, do you want to know how he died or what he died of? And I said, yeah, I really do. I want to know. And she said, years and years ago, he was born with an ascended testicle. And I kept telling him over and over, do you remember when I was telling him? She said, do you remember when I was telling him every time I see him, did you go to the doctor yet? Did you go to the doctor yet? And as we'd be going down the steps for their house, their apartment that they lived in, they had an apartment building, she would always say that. Did you make an appointment with the doctor? I remember her saying that. He never did. And she said it became malignant and it spread throughout his body. And he had some help with Agent Orange. I mean, that was a problem too. And it didn't take him long. When the doctors opened him up, they didn't make fine stitches. The stitches were about an inch apart when they sewed him back up because they wanted him to die faster. And I said, well, that makes a lot more sense, Pearl. And I gave her a hug. Shook hands with Harv. Harv looked terrible. He looked like he was in bad shape. Looked like he was ready to go. He had emphysema. They all died shortly after that. It wasn't long after that. Everybody died. And I had moved to Florida. And my whole life changed. But as far as being with the outfit and being a wild killer or fighter, most of the time when I was with the outfit, I wasn't. But my earlier years, yeah, I was a scrapper. I wasn't called Billy the Kid for nothing. I was wild. I did things that most people would never do. But that was my life. It was my life then. Never became the same. I modeled myself after Tony Spilaccio. I wore nice suits, sharkskin suits, whatever. I got rid of the blue jeans. I got rid of the leather chaps, the leather coats. I sold my motorcycle. I went a different direction completely. But I had a very, very rough young life. It was very rough. And I got to be honest when I tell you, I never give a damn about anybody or anything. It was called let whatever's going to happen, happen, because I didn't care. If you were bigger than I was, fine. Didn't make any difference to me. I was used to killing people by then. When I came home from Vietnam, I killed a lot of people. I really didn't care. One or two didn't make much more difference. So that's my old life, folks. And now I've graduated into what I never thought would happen, a senior citizen. And I tell stories on a thing that I never heard of when I was younger called YouTube. And I never thought I'd write a book. I never wanted to be famous. I never wanted to be noticed at all. It all just happened. And to be very honest with you, I didn't plan one thing in my entire life. It all just happened. And with that, I want to say thank you. God bless you. Keep you well. And I hope you enjoyed my story.